Hello, thank you for joining us on today's talk on funeral and its impact on grief. I'm Hong Chai, the Executive Director of the Association of Funeral Directors, Singapore, or AFD. I'm also the founder of Singapore Funeral Services with more than 20 years of experience in this profession. Our association was formed since year 2000 with the intention of raising the standards of the profession and to engage with external stakeholders with a collective voice. We have since worked closely with NEA on various consultative projects to help sculpt the funeral landscape and also craft guidelines for our profession, such as guidelines on handling of the deceased in the funeral parlor and guidelines for hearse operators. And we strive to continue to improve the funeral profession and serve our members. Grief comes when we experience the loss of someone dear to us, and we believe conducting a funeral is a step in the grieving process. Our three speakers will be touching on different aspects of the funeral. Mr. Ang Tze Chien will speak on pre-planning and grief, Mr. Darren Cheng on how the funeral profession has changed to help families with the grieving process, and Ms. Jolie Ang on proper embalming and its impact on grief. Life is full of uncertainties. Planning helps to alleviate some of our concerns, yet the only certainty in life is death. Here to share with us more on pre-planning is Mr. Ang Tze Chien.
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's talk on funeral and its impact on grief. There are three subtopics in this webinar, which I and my EXCO members will be sharing with all of you. Today, mobile phones is part of our daily lives. There's grief and stress when we lose our mobile phone. However, this grief can be managed by buying another mobile phone. But when we lose our loved one, it is a permanent physical loss. Today, I'll be sharing about the importance of pre-planning funerals and how it can reduce the grief and unnecessary stress it brings about when we pass us on. In this webinar, you will also learn how to pre-plan a funeral. Knowledge about pre-planning funerals is useful for everyone, and especially so for professionals in the grief and bereavement space. Equipping ourselves with this knowledge can help you provide better care to your patients and their families. Here's an introduction of myself. I am Tze Chien, the Managing Director of Ang Chin Mall Group, the current Vice President of the Association of Funeral Directors Singapore, and a certified pre-planner. What keeps me going in this profession for more than 20 years is that I get to help the community and live my life meaningfully. Now, I spend most of my time in uplifting the funeral profession, talent development, giving free talks and webinars to the community, and philanthropy. The reason why I want to do this pre-planning talk is to help individuals and families avoid the unnecessary pain and stress when death happens. I've served more than 3,000 families and seen a fair share of unity and breakups of a family. Funeral is an event that brings a family together or breaks a family up. There was a case where I've seen the family arguing over different opinions. The deceased is an uncle who passed away due to a heart attack. When I arrived, he was lying motionless on the cold floor of the living room. Doctor has left after certifying the death. I couldn't bring uncle to our care center to cleanse him and to dress him up properly because his children were arguing on how the funeral should be conducted. Each of his children practices a different faith, and each felt that their faith is best for Papa. It came to a point where one of the children said, "Ask Papa which religion rights to conduct for the funeral." And I can see at the end of the living room, Mama was extremely upset, crying non-stop over the loss of her husband and more about the quarrels between her children. She asked me how to resolve the children disputes. It took me 6 hours managing the family differences before we can transfer to uncle to our care center. That incident got me thinking on how I can prevent this from happening to other families. So I started this journey of educating the community about the importance of end-of-life conversations. Pre-planning is important to give the dead and the living a peace of mind. So let me ask you a quick question. Are funerals for the living or for the dead? Well, the answer is funerals are for the living and the dead. A funeral is for the departed to transcend to the next world and for the living to grieve properly through a meaningful funerals. I was recently invited by Channel News Asia to contribute a commentary on the importance of funeral pre-planning. If you're interested to read the commentary, you may search for it online. The title is A Pre-Planned Funeral is the Last Gift We Can Leave for Our Loved Ones. Let me start by explaining how the information I'm sharing today about funeral pre-planning can help professionals in the death-related services. Professionals in the grief and bereavement space like funeral directors, social workers, all of us work hand in hand to ensure that the grieving receive the care they need. Our relationship is like how relay runners pass the baton from one runner to the next. In our case, the runners represents us, professionals in the bereavement profession, while the baton represents the grieving. All of us must do our roles well so that the grieving families and loved ones receive the best care. Our colleagues from the healthcare team provide appropriate medical attention. Social workers provide financial assistance support, counseling, and community resources to aid them in times of need. When a patient passes on, funeral directors like myself step in and step up to guide families in their grieving process by helping them plan meaningful funerals. We care for the deceased, provide options on the funeral choices, and walk this final journey with the family. As a funeral director, we like our colleagues in the grief and bereavement space to bring home these two very important points. Funeral is an important part of grieving process. Pre-planning funerals ahead of time gives the families the time and the right headspace to think of how to say goodbye. We all want patients and their families to grieve well. So let's work together and continue educating on the importance of this message so that the families receive the best level of care. We are constantly making plans in our everyday lives, from which school to study, which healthcare plans, insurance plans to buy to protect ourselves, which venue to celebrate our joyous occasions from birthdays and weddings. So pre-planning is ensuring our wishes are carried out in the way we want to be remembered. And why is pre-planning important? Because we are who we are based on the choices we make in our life. There's a consequence for every decision we make and a consequence if we choose not to make any decision. So what happens when we do not have a funeral pre-plan? Funeral is an event that brings the family together or breaks the family apart. So it's very sad for me as a funeral director to see a family quarrel during the funeral and breaks up after the event. The loved ones you leave behind might have more guilt after the funeral is completed because they may have carried out a funeral which they think is what you want, but not necessarily as what you really want. Sometimes they continue with their lives wondering if they have fulfilled your last wishes. I would say give your loved ones love and not regrets when you pass on. Don't give them the extra burden of second guessing. Who needs to pre-plan? All of us need to pre-plan for ourselves, because it is about our own departure, and our own departure affects our loved ones. When we pre-plan, we're responsible to ourselves and the people we love. It helps to relieve the emotional burden that our loved ones have to go through when we die. It is quite common to avoid these necessary conversations with our loved ones because we love them. We're afraid of losing them. The pain associated with the loss of our loved ones prevent us from broaching this dying, death, and funeral topics. You are not alone. If talking about death will kill you, I would die a million times. How to pre-plan? I think it's important to run through our thought process, to speak to our family members, our friends, and people we love. So how to pre-plan? First of all, we need to think of our final resting place, which is, do we want it to be burial? Do we want to be buried in the burial grounds? Do we want to have our ashes in columbarium? Do we want our cremated remains to be scattered to the sea or inland ash scattering, or the beautiful way to be remembered by transforming our cremated remains into Algonanza memorial diamonds? The number of days is also important. The attendees is also important because the number of expected attendees will determine the size of the location and whether a location that is chosen for a wake is suitable or not. And I cannot emphasize more, especially when it comes to religion. This is often the most contentious issue among families, especially in Singapore, where it is common to find family members practicing different faiths and feels that their faiths is what the deceased should also practice, sometimes on bedside or in funeral. So once you have done all of this initial plans, it is important to find a person in charge. This person can be someone you feel comfortable with, a person you can entrust to notify the funeral company. It can be your children, it can be your sibling, it can be your nephew, nieces, neighbor, or a good friend. So once you're done a pre-plan, share your plans. Once you have pre-planned, you need to make known to the people you love so that they know you already have a pre-plan, and it will be less contentious when it comes to execution of funeral. Your loved one can focus on the grief and let funeral director take care of your wishes, the logistics, and paperwork of the funeral. So how to pre-plan? I think this is easy. Speak to a certified funeral pre-planner. They can guide you in the discovery and planning process. All you need to do is to invest 1.5 to 2 hours and have the courage to take action to consult. After speaking to them, you're clearer with your options. So many may ask which funeral company to choose. And I'm going to share with you some of the tips on how you choose a funeral company. I would say go and visit them at their company, check out their cleanliness, check if they have full-time staff members, hearse, real caskets, so that you can be reassured that the funeral company that you have screened has the ability to carry out your wishes. It's not dependent on a person when it comes to funeral. Funeral execution requires a dedicated team with resources. So speak to them on the options, and you must be comfortable with them, because the funeral directors and the funeral company are the parties to help you with the last passage of rites. So what can you prepare in advance now? With the information you have today, think through of what you want and what you do not want for a funeral. Speak to a certified funeral pre-planner to understand your options and to know the current regulations in Singapore. So next, prepare your last portrait. Prepare the clothing you want to be dressed up. In your mind, think of someone you feel comfortable to entrust to execute the contract with the funeral company. It can be your children, your sibling, nephew, nieces, neighbor, or even a good friend. So having shared all of this, there are some key ways I want to conclude today's presentation. It's number one, how do you want to be remembered? Number two, who is the person you entrust for the funeral? Number three, make your plan known to your loved ones. Number four, speak to a certified pre-planner today. With what I've shared today as my presentation, thank you for listening in, and I look forward for any Q&A questions that you might have, and myself and my EXCO members will be here to answer any of questions that you may have later. Thank you.
Many of the considerations of organizing a funeral has remained the same through the years, and yet funerals in Singapore has gone through a lot of changes over the years. Here to share more on this is Mr. Darren Cheng.
Hi everyone, I'm Darren from AFD. I'm the treasurer of the Association of Funeral Directors. I'm also the CEO of my company, Direct Funeral Services. In the picture, you can see a picture of my beautiful wife, Jenny Tay, and her father, Roland Tay, my father-in-law. Our company, Direct Funeral Services, was founded by my father-in-law 40 years ago. He's a well-known Samaritan of Singapore, always providing pro bono funeral services. We helped him build it to a household brand, providing affordable one-stop funeral services. I joined him after I did 8 years in counseling, have a master's in counseling, and my areas of practice were on people with depression, insomnia, grief, children. And through my experience, I wrote 2 books that help with my customers cope with grief, especially explaining grief to children. It's Where Did Grandpa Go? And I Remember Grandma. A lot of what I'm going to share about how people grieve in the past will be based on Roland's own experience, as well as what I can gather and research. I think when we think about the past and present and how the funeral profession has changed, we'll talk about first the exterior, the look of it, the physical look of it, and the soft touches to it. I think in the first picture on the left, you can see the girl crying and wearing the mourning garments. So one major change, and I think for the better, is that mourning garments have changed in style from last time to today. In the past, they wear and they actually rent from undertakers all these mourning garments. So after each family uses them, they will wash and rent it out again. Today, our mourning garment has changed to a simple white t-shirt or white polo tee with a colored pants. And it's a lot more comfortable. Not to mention, you don't have to wear what someone else has worn before. You have your brand new set. In the past as well, people used to hire professional mourners. So like this, in this short film by Ting Li Hua, Good Morning, it's about a professional mourner. I have never seen a professional mourner actually. I've stepped into this business about 8 years ago, and I've never seen a professional mourner. I think some of my fellow friends in AFD, they have, but I haven't. And it's a practice long gone. It was used to help express words that their family members cannot say because they're too hurt or crying too much. And they help express this for the family. Although this practice is no longer around, in the present day, we have changed it to something I think much better, which I'll share later on. On the right is a screen capture of a lion dance. And this lion is special. It's very different. You will notice the colors is black and white. We still have this in Singapore, however, it's very rarely practiced, where the lion dance used specifically for the mourning of someone. On the picture on the left, you can see stilt walkers. Now, stilt walkers is something that in the Chinese tradition, you see in every single festival, be it a good festival, a sad festival, a happy or sad event. They are always there, right? Every province, every city have their own origin story of the stilt walkers. I think the more popular one I've heard are stilt walkers represent the gods that saved a small village from drowning in a flood. So it's a tradition still practiced today. However, in Singapore, they no longer have this. In China, they still have that. In Singapore, no longer. Roland tells me it's highly likely because it's a very skilled profession, and I think most of us Singaporeans won't want to do that. It's too tough, it's too rigorous, and not everyone can do it, right? So we don't see this anymore. They used to do stunts and jump through hoops and all that in funerals, and that was all part of the fanfare of a funeral. The picture on the right is a picture of what we call the Xiao Pai. This is my own company, Xiao Pai. I can't find a photo of the past where Xiao Pai took. Sometimes it's a band, sometimes it's a bigger patch. But the idea is, in the past, I remember when my grandpa passed away 30 years ago, I wore the Xiao Pai to school for 49 days. Yes, grandpa died. It was sad. I mean, I was too young, but I know it's sad, right? But it was cool. Like, I go to school, there's special badge to wear to school, and that felt very cool to me. And that's what my other friends felt when they wear the badge to school. So yes, they're sad, but people ask them about it, they feel cool explaining what is it about. Today, however, the badge is no longer worn to school or to work. People wear it only for the duration of the wake, and when they go home from the wake, they leave it at the altar table. It's very interesting how this has changed, even though it's something so small. And then Roland always says that funerals of the past were very fun because people were always drinking, playing mahjong, playing sikipik, playing cards. And funerals usually last for 7 days, which means for 6 nights, the people will be playing from dusk to dawn, you know. And it's amazing how much energy they have to just keep playing mahjong. I guess all this got disrupted when we got Facebook and the mobile phones, so people don't play mahjong at funerals anymore. People use phones instead. This has changed already, and we no longer see this, although most funerals today still sometimes, no, not in this COVID time, maybe pre-COVID, we still give out mahjong sets, mahjong paper. Some families do request to play mahjong, but they no longer do it throughout the night. In the past, families like my aunt, I have 6 aunts and 3 uncles, so it's a big family. So 守夜 for 7 days is manageable. But in today's context, come on, I only have 2 siblings. Most of my cousins, they're 1 sibling. So if we have to do this for a funeral, I think we won't last, right? So most companies today, especially companies in AFD, we offer what we call the night virtual night security service, where our team will send someone to sit at the wake, to watch the wake, to make sure the incense doesn't burn out, and just take care of the place so that your family can go back and rest. This is especially for void decks. Right? In the picture on the right, you'll see a procession, and inside there is a hearse, the huace. This style of a hearse is still used today, although very, very rarely. People have upgraded and changed it. It's a modified lorry. But what is interesting is the people around the hearse. If you look at it, look at the procession, wow. I think it's comparable with Chingay. Roland tells me that when his own parents passed away, when his grandpa passed away, he walked from Lavender to Bencoolen. It's about a 1-hour walk, maybe 45 minutes if you're fast, especially with the coffin and under the sweltering sun. So people used to walk very, very long distances for processions. Today, we walk at the most to the HDB car park or maybe to the end of the road, and then for safety regulations, we go on board the bus and we head off to the respective burial plots or crematoriums. There also was a very large need for manpower because coffins in the past were very, very big. On the left is a smaller size of what we usually carry, the Yuan Bao Xing coffin. The wood is very thick because they're all meant for burials, and in the past people bury almost 100% until we changed to the cremation trend, right? Talk about burials. The picture on the right is of Bukit Brown. It's the tombstone of Mr. Ong Sam Leong. It is 600 square meters. 600 square meters, come on, that's like a size of a house. And there's a moat around the tomb. You can see a moat, and the moat used to have fish where the gravekeepers would take care of, and the kids would come and play and swim in the moat. So people spent a lot of effort into designing their tombstones. Well, of course, the wealthier you are, the more intricate the design. But it shows how much emphasis people placed in this. Juxtapose this with today. Today, people, because by government regulations, we can't choose a tombstone anymore. We can still choose tombstone, but we cannot choose a plot where we want to be buried. So if you want to be buried, you can be buried for 15 years. And the plot as designated to you is by the government. So the only feng shui elements you can design is on the tombstone itself, the color, the style, the picture, maybe the shape, or the words on the tombstone. Other than that, after 15 years, you have to be exhumed, and most people cremate again. So things change along the way, and it's very interesting to see. I'll share with you how, when I first came in 8 years ago, I was in the middle of the transition of funeral companies from back then to what you see today. Today, most companies have changed and modernized. When we stepped in, it was the funeral industry, the funeral profession is on the cusp of transforming, but not yet, right? We saw most of the changes in 2014 and 15. When we first came in, everyone was using this style of setup for wake. It's called a Sanmen Sizhu. So Sanmen Sizhu represents the 3 doors in a house and the 4 pillars. We're talking about a house back in China when our ancestors used to stay. The coffin is always placed in a hallway, and so the center door will frame the coffin. When me and Jenny came, we asked Roland, why must the tentage be yellow? Why is the style always yellow? And he said it's tradition. We asked the tentage supplier and tradition, and tentage supplier didn't tell us it's tradition. He said his grandpa told him yellow is the easiest to take care of, yellow is the cheapest to acquire. And that's why most funerals use yellow. And it's been passed down since then. So me and Jenny, we decided to make a change in that. We've seen how overseas, Taiwan, Japan, funerals can be a lot prettier. They can be a lot not stuck with this design. So this design, Roland's been using this design from 1960s to 2000 plus. It doesn't change at all. So we decided to make a change, and we asked someone to help us design. This is our Buddhist funeral in a void deck. Our focus changed to allowing a more welcoming sense, a garden sense to the family, where family feel when they walk around the coffin, it feels more pleasant. And so kids and adults alike will feel more at ease. So when this changed, customers were then surprised that, wow, so a funeral can be like this. People always have a mindset funerals must be sad, funeral must be gloomy and dull. But when they saw what we've transformed it to, and what many of my peers in the AFD has transformed wake setup to, they were impressed. And they realized that the funeral profession is making a change. I think the next change that we witnessed, well, my company, we did for self, was the hearses changed. No longer people use the huace, but people still use just a very small minority. Most of my customers prefer a Continental limousine hearse, such as this. Mine is a Mitsuoka. Some of my friends, Singapore Casket has a Mercedes hearse. Then there's a Chevrolet hearse. There are all kinds of Continental hearses out there, and they bring a lot more class to the final departure of a loved one. And most of all, I think a very important change in the funeral profession from an undertaker to a professional is the visual outlook of the person, as well as the kind of people that we hire. When I first joined the business, we had only 5 to 6 people in our company, and they were a range of 50 or 60. Mostly Hokkien uncles who don't speak English. It was a bit difficult for us because when we tell them, like, hey, don't wear slippers to the wake? Like, come on, they were wearing slippers at the wake. They wear slippers to service customers, and they even smoke while they talk to the customers. And that to me is very worrisome. I'm from customer service, so I know that this is something you should never do. But because of the nature of the whole profession, the whole industry back then, everyone's just like that. And when I tell them, hey, sir, can you don't smoke in front of family members? And say, what do you want to do? You fire me? And because we're short-handed, we can't fire people, right? So we decided to make a few changes first. The first change was to make a uniform change. We placed the uniform onto the people. The people in the past, they used to just wear a white shirt and black pants and slippers, shoes, whatever they feel like wearing, sports shoes, up to them. We can't control that. But then when I came up with the uniform, we decided to design a uniform based on hospitality. So people from hospitality wear similar type of uniforms to give people the impression that we are serious, that we are here to help, that we are here and we care, right? And surprisingly, the people who threatened us left because they couldn't cope with the uniform. They didn't like the idea. And we started hiring more people. So then we started bringing in younger people, because younger people saw our uniform, they liked it, they saw the sense of identity, they saw what we were doing, and they felt motivated to be part of the change in the funeral profession. So today, my average age of my employee is 32. Now it's a large group between 20 to 40. And we hire a lot from outside the industry, a lot from events, a lot from customer service. We want to change the whole funeral profession to that of similar to hospitality, where we're here to take care of the customer's needs. And as we changed, many of the friends in AFD, in association, changed as well. You name it, all the brands, all the big brands, they've been changing. And you notice today that everyone's wearing their own identity, their own uniform. And overall, this makes our whole profession a lot more professional. We also changed the way we approach customers. In the past, the undertaker was king. You know, he tells you, oh, you must do this, you have to do it. He tells you, you must buy this, you must buy this. And we didn't like that. So part of our AFD's mission is to promote transparent and clear billing of your services to customers. So we have always been transparent, and we try to push our transparency even more with our service agreements that we consult with the family members. Remember we showed the Xiao Pai last time. So funny thing is, in the past, Xiao Pai was used to identify the rank of a person in a family. If your rank is not that high, you cannot order things from undertaker. Because obviously, if everyone chips in and say, hey, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, and then who's gonna pay, right? So undertaker has to listen to the correct people only. So today, we have modified that to a service agreement. When we meet the point of contact, we have a service agreement to indicate every single line clearly what they would like and what they would not like, so that they can control the bill size. On top of that, remember I said that there were professional mourners in the past. Today, we have a more modern touch. We have a master of ceremonies. This is a practice that Taiwan, Japan has, and we started seeing them in Singapore in 2011, 2012. So we said we needed our own master of ceremonies. We went to Taiwan, we hired someone to come in and train a group of our team. And today we have 6 master of ceremonies in our company, and they provide eulogy services to the family members. And what do? They will go down to families and they'll talk to family about the brief life of the dearly departed. And they'll craft a bespoke eulogy, and they'll share on the final day the person's life. And if there are any words that family members would like to say but are not able to enunciate, our MC will help them. They will craft and weave the words in so that it's easier for the families to express themselves. This to me is one of the best and greatest change in our funeral profession. So we move from mourners who crying to professional people who are professional MCs. Then what else changed? I mean, if you look at a lot of funerals today, you'll see the TV montage. It's a popular option right now. So we like photos, and we think that photos can tell a person's story very much. So a TV montage is there for a lot of families. We learn a lot from the wedding business, right? I mean, after all, it's 2 great events. The same group of people attend both. You same number of people. You need decor, flowers, you need catering, you need all the same logistics. Just that, in a funeral, one person is missing, right? So we learn a lot from weddings. We brought in photographers, brought in photo montages, and this brought a lot more life to a funeral, and it was a lot more personal. In our company, we take it a step further. I always felt strange that even as a professional from the funeral industry, I sit down and visit a friend's wake. I don't know what to say, because I only know my friend. I don't know his father or his uncle, and I have no idea what to talk to him about. I guess 100% of the time, people will always ask, so how did things happen? How did he pass on? And I can imagine that if I were the person grieving, I will have to explain how my loved one passed on maybe 100 times, 200 times, 300 times. And I think the topic runs dry after a while. So I wanted to make a change. I wanted to be able to relate to the person who passed on. So what we do in the company, we create a short biography of the person who passed on. It's a very simple biography we do for all our customers if they opt for it. and it will help share what the person liked, what the person loved to do. And so conversations can start off like, oh, your dad likes to bring you to Malaysia to hunt for durian. Or, oh, your mom cooks a damn solid sambal belacan, you know. So instead of, oh, how the person died, you can talk more about the person, get to know the person a lot better. And then this will then invoke memories and loving memories of their loved ones to help them cope with grief. Earlier, I talked about burials and land burials. Then Singapore moved towards cremation and being stored in a columbarium. Then we realized the problem. My grandpa is in the columbarium, right? I visit him once a year. Well, I visit him when my mom asks me to visit him. I'm supposed to visit him. But sometimes, you know, you're busy and all that. And I can imagine if it's tough for me, what about my kids? My kids don't know my grandpa. Now, my mom hasn't visited my great-grandpa in a long time. I haven't visited my great-grandpa either. So after 3 generations, there's a problem with the storage. You know, who takes care of them? Nobody tends to them anymore. So there are more options today. And part of the options is inland scattering. There's sea scattering, which we practiced for quite a while. And inland scattering is something new where your loved one's remains is pulverized to very fine ash and poured into a very beautiful garden. It is secular, it is very serene, very calming, and the environment is very beautiful. It is situated in Lim Chu Kang, but it feels so nice when I went there. So this is something by images are from NEA. And I think the way we change how we commemorate our loved ones will change because of this. I mean, no longer is there a columbarium to visit every Qingming. Now, maybe it's just a photo. So as time changes and policies change, the way people grieve change as well. However, we've been struck, the whole funeral industry has been struck with COVID-19. COVID-19, I mean, we didn't get COVID-19, but COVID-19 hit everybody, right? Everyone, we're all affected by COVID-19. Especially so in the funeral business because we're also part of events. And part of events, we've been limited by number of visitors at a wake. There's no longer any food and beverage. Live streaming has become a new, well, it's been a while, it's been there for a while, however, it's gained popularity now. And wake durations are a lot shorter. In the past, 7 days is normal. When I came, 5 days is normal. Now 3 days is the new norm, maybe 2 days. So COVID-19 is going to last, like Mr. Lee said, it's going to last for quite a while. And if that happens, how will people grieve differently? Will the length of the wake change? Oh, I always wondered, and I always felt that sometimes, even though it's inconvenient for families, the inconvenience actually bring them closer. You know how like going through tough times together brings the family closer? And also because the lesser number of people are awake, the families get to talk to each other and bond more closer to each other. So COVID-19 is here to stay. And it's interesting how we as funeral professions can help facilitate our family members to grieve in peace and to help them feel as much comfort and at peace as possible. So that's my part. Thank you very much for tuning in and take care.
Being able to have a final view of the deceased helps bring about acceptance for family members in the grieving process. In the early days, this was only possible before the closing of the coffin, the start of the wake. However, with the introduction of the embalming process, families can now view the deceased for the duration of the wake. Ms. Jolie Ang will share with us more on this.
Hi, thank you for having us today for the funeral and its impact on grief. My name is Angelie May and I'm the committee member for the AFD, and I'm also the managing director for the Life Celebrant and the representative of Ang Yu Seng Funeral Parlour. Now, I will be covering on the last segment, which is on embalming and grief. Now, let us first look at the definition for embalming. Now, embalming is the art and science of preserving human remains by treating them in its modern form with chemicals to delay decomposition. So this is essentially why in Singapore we do a lot of embalming, because most of the time we have a funeral wake for 3 days, 5 days or 7 days, and we usually have it at the void deck or in an open space. So what we need to do is to make sure that the body is still viewable throughout the 3 days, 5 days, and 7 days. Now, there are certain goals that we are trying to achieve when we are doing embalming. So there are 3 steps and also 3 goals that we wish to achieve. First is we want to do disinfection. Second is to do preservation. And lastly, to do presentation. And I actually indicated restoration for some instances. So when are the times where we do restoration work? When someone passes away because and damage the face features. So a lot of times what we are trying to achieve is to make sure that the face, this area is presentable, especially the hands are presentable. So in the event that the face suffers certain trauma or there's certain damage to the features, it is our responsibility or embalmer's goal to actually restore using wax to restore the features of that person. Now, disinfection, the primary purpose of embalming is we want to destroy the pathogens, which are the disease-producing organism. Now, why do we want to do that? It is to ensure that the deceased is actually safe for handling, not just for family members, but as well for the funeral directors and the embalmers. The second step that we would like to take is to preserve the body. So, which is essentially what embalming is doing, to prevent the decomposition throughout a period of time. And as you can see, the photos here, these are some of the famous leaders that have been permanently preserved. They are perpetually embalmed to be at state or to be presentable or presented for public members of public to view them in a museum. And the third step is to do presentation. Now, this is essential for funeral directors as well as embalmers to achieve because we want to create a pleasant last memory picture of the deceased. So I want to stress a little bit more about presentation. Now, presentation, just simply giving a photograph to the embalmers, and embalmers can actually comb the hair based on how he or she used to wear the hairstyle or even lipstick, the color that you use. These are essential to create a pleasant memory. Because every time when we speak to family members and we ask them, their impression about embalming, I'm sure some of you probably have encountered where they actually share that, wow, embalming, he or she doesn't look like who she is. Or my dad, one of my clients actually said her experience about her father's passing years ago was that the embalmer basically put very red blusher on the cheek. So didn't really look like father, right? So that's the reason why presentation is an area that we shouldn't look over. Now, I wanted to share this picture with you to share about a funeral that I have to take care recently, where the husband has actually requested for a closed casket. So, look at the cartoon on the side. Under the circumstances, Mrs. Dumpty, I recommended a closed casket. Now, so that's the reason why we talked about earlier about restoration art. So why we want to do restoration art is to help the features of the person. Years ago, I have a client who was caught in the fire. And he actually passed away due to too much, fumes inhalation, and he passed unfortunately in the hospital. But when we received the departed, his skin were all like peeling off because of the fire, and we have to clean him. We have to, peel off all his dead skin as well. So his skin was really, really very raw, and we had to use certain treatments to help him out. And we actually did a viewing. So there was a viewing panel for family members to continue to view him. Because of his sudden passing, it was really, really hard for the family. So having an open casket viewing was really helpful for the family to grieve. And I remember when family members came, they were all expecting to see evidence of him being burnt. But when they look at him, they were surprised that he was surprisingly looking like his old self, his thick eyebrow, and there was no evidence of him being burnt or suffered in the fire. So that's essentially why we would want to do the restoration art. Now, coming back to this particular casket, as you can see, it's a closed casket. Now, when we send the casket back to the chapel, to the funeral parlor, because earlier on the husband has actually told us that he did not want to view his wife anymore. His wife had actually passed away pretty suddenly, and he couldn't get over the fact that she has passed. So he kept saying to me at the mortuary that, Anjali, I don't want to see my wife. I don't want to see my wife. I want to remember how she looked like when she's still alive. So when we brought her to the funeral parlor, it was her mother and her brother who insisted for us to open up the casket, because it was a few days funeral and we have actually done embalming for him, and this was something that we wanted to make sure that the family could have a choice to keep an open casket or a closed casket. So for this instance, the mother and the brother actually came up to us and said, could you please open up the casket? And I look over at the husband gave me a nod, but he still remained far away, at a corner. But when he saw his mother-in-law and his brother-in-law, hovering over her and holding her hand and sort of like stroking her hair, that gave him a lot of comfort and confidence. And then he stepped forward and he wanted to spend time with his wife. So we actually got the family members to spend some time before we actually closed the casket and had a closed casket funeral service. So before embalming, I want to show you how important and what can, we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to show you one example of what embalming can do to certain bodies that we receive. So giving you this example of jaundice body, now you can see that this departed has a very yellowish skin, right, for jaundice body. So after embalming, this is, imagine, your loved ones looking like this, lying in a casket. I'm sure you won't feel comfortable. So after embalming, after injecting her with a certain type of chemicals to sort of, help out with the yellowish, we actually achieved this result. Now, how do you feel when you see your loved ones lying like this, looking back as the natural color? So when the family came and they spent some time with mom, they were really shocked to see the condition of their mom, because they saw their mom in the hospital for the last few weeks and days looking like the earlier photo. And this gave them so much comfort, and they even participate in putting on the lipstick for the mother. So how important is embalming for a grieving family? And you see, the key word here is viewing, the value of viewing. How important, as I mentioned, about viewing the departed. So I want to share this story about Misha Pei. She's a 6-year-old girl, but she has planned her funeral with us. In fact, you can Google Misha Pei, P-E-H, and you will see her story. Now, this 6-year-old girl knew that she was going to pass, and she wanted everything to be done according to what she wanted. And perhaps some of you know who Misha is. I got all this permission from Rintia, the mummy, to share her photo. Now, why do I share this? The lasting visual memory of your beloved. So what we did for Misha was we embalmed her. She actually had to wait for 3 days. So all the balloons that you see in this photograph and the photographs that is behind her mother, all this were chosen by Misha herself. So look at her. This is how she looks like after embalming. She really looked very natural. We didn't do heavy makeup on her, except for just like some eye color, and also just very just touch up on the lip color. So you can see that everybody was so comfortable to spend time with her, that she's not resting in a casket, but she's resting there. So family members and friends who came, they actually wrote messages and fold origami and fold it into heart shape, or even to paper crane, and place it on her as their way of blessing for Misha. So you can see how healing these 3 days of viewing was for the family. Now, the value of viewing, first of all, it provides comfort and time for everybody to bid farewell to their loved one in their own personal way. So by giving them this time, you allow family member to be able to come to terms with it. And number 2 is to provide closure. So by seeing their loved one lying in a casket, it actually gives a lot of comfort and also closure. I want to share this example of a story that I heard from a funeral director who in US. And this was during the conference when I attended a funeral conference in US, and a funeral director shared a story where he had to help an individual, a gentleman, for a funeral during the 9/11. So he was actually caught in the World Trade Center, but his body was never found. So the parents have given him some personal effect of him, and then they had a burial for this boy. Now, what was very disturbing, and I think this talks a lot about grief as well, was the parents could not come to terms with the passing of the son. So every time when they go to the ground zero, they will walk around the ground zero, the surrounding blocks, and look at all the homeless. And the reason why they need to look at the homeless is because in their mind, they have not got the closure that they need. They haven't got to see their son in the casket. So when they share with the funeral director, they said that, you know, what if my son has amnesia? What if he forgotten his, you know, he lost his memory during this this episode, and he became homeless. He doesn't know how to come home. So they are still hopeful and hoping to see their son. But you know, it's been so many years, and of course, things didn't sort of work out that way. So this is why viewing is so important, to give them that kind of closure when they see their loved one lying in a casket. And we also, by doing viewing, you provide a means of social support. So despite, you know, whichever final disposition the family has chosen for the body, a public visitation is very helpful for family and friends to deal with the grieving. So just recall our experience when our late mentor minister Lee Kuan Yew, when he passed away. It was awake for almost 7 days, and he was viewed, and there was public visitation. This and you know, residents and citizens actually went to pay their final respect. And we have people who help, you know, to this viewing actually allow family and friends to ease into the transition of their new life as well. So by having them to do the viewing, it really helps them very much in this area. Now, I want to share with you a service that we provided, which is Showers of Love. And I call it therapy to grief because when we get family members to participate, as you know, Muslim family, the Hindus, they actually do this service where family members come together to help the departed in the final dressing and also to take part in the makeup. So essentially what Showers of Love, what we want to achieve is the same thing, where we get family members to participate. Now we have gotten a lot of positive and very cathartic experience review shared by the family members. Now, our Showers of Love is a dedicated facility for decedent care. So when we started this service, why do we want family members to participate? And just by getting family to just wipe the feet or putting on moisturizer, wiping the hands, give thanks to the loved one, it really helped them to have this closure with their loved ones. And I personally have to go through it, even though I started this Showers of Love in 2017. Two months ago, I actually have to go through it myself because my grandmother has passed. And I insisted that I wanted to do Showers of Love for my grandma. And the reason why we did that was because towards my grandma's passing, she actually had a lot of dry skin, right? She was sort of not able to move to the toilet to shower herself. So we had to actually use moisturizer. So every time she keeps asking me to moisturize her skin because it got really itchy. So we couldn't bathe her, and everything that we did was just wiping her down. And the reason why her condition deteriorated was because she was locked in her house for 14 days due to quarantine order. She happened to be in the same clinic as one of the COVID patients. So during these 2 weeks, without seeing her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, actually her condition deteriorated almost, like dived down. And within 2 weeks, she passed. So what I want to share is that, you know, during this period of COVID, there are a lot of people who may be suffering, and so reach out for them and then be kind to one another. Now, coming back to the experience that I had, I remember how every one of my family members actually participate in helping my grandmother, you know, and every time when we wash away all the dry skin on her back, we would tell her like, "Ama, oh, now you're very clean. Yeah, you don't have to worry." Because my grandma is someone who really wants to be very clean and very proper. So it really made us feel really good by helping her to do this final gesture. And, you know, every one of us surround her, and it was really a feel good moment for us, and also helped us in our grief journey, as well as helping my mom. So this is a picture of a family member who insisted on doing a full shower for her daughter and with the permission of the mom. And the mom shared with me that her daughter was someone who was very vain and wanted to look good all the time. And just watching her go through this whole experience of service, she really felt very comforted and very grateful that she has this service that she could do for the final gesture for her daughter. So the 5 love languages that we hope to, and we envisioned that we can help family members during their grief journey is by getting family members to write messages, word of affirmation, and then maybe fold it into origami and then give it as a gift to their loved ones. Physical touch, getting family members to touch their departed loved ones, which is essential. That's why we need to first disinfect the body. Then to do act of service, such as combing the hair, putting on lipstick, putting on the shoes, or even just simple gesture of buttoning the clothes or putting on a tie for their father means a lot. And also allowing the family to spend quality time. So that's the reason why embalming allows all these things to be possible, so that you can still spend time with the departed. So in conclusion, embalming is an accepted death care process worldwide. So everywhere you go, you hear of the word embalming. And it also allows viewing for the duration of the funeral wake. So it's first is safe for family members to come close together to handle, and then it also allows family members to view their loved ones during this period. And the psychology level of accepting, the death of their loved one is actually higher if they undergo this process of viewing. And participating in the body preparations such as showers of love, as well as family assisted due to religion, it actually provides a very cathartic experience to the grieving family. So with that, thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing some of the questions that you may have for all of us. Thank you.